Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Paige, here once again with another video on Arrow Season 6, and this is going to be my review for episode 16 of this season, otherwise entitled The Thanatos Guild. But of course, before we get into the rest of the video, there will be spoilers ahead, and yeah, I guess you could predict what's going to happen in this episode, but there is still some other spoilers that if you've not watched the episode, you might get annoyed with, so go watch the episode, then come back to this video later on. But if you are continuing, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below what was your favourite part of the episode, what didn't you like too much, and just what got you thinking or talking. Just let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, be sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. So this episode is the second part of the whole Roy Harper return storyline. So what was last episode? It was the first part. So we saw Roy Harper return verily, that's a new word, very heavily connected to Richard Dragon or Ricardo Diaz, and what he was going about. And then we also had some Black Siren stuff going on last episode as well, which really doesn't carry on into this episode apart from a couple of mentions here and there. But it was random starting this episode off with a flashback, and it wasn't like John Barrowman came back to play Malcolm Merle, and that was like directly ripped from the end of Arrow Season 2, like one of the final scenes from that season. And it's basically when Thea agreed to go out with Malcolm and she was going to learn stuff, which led on to Season 3 where we saw Thea on, was it Corto Maltese? I think that was the island. And she was, living there with Malcolm. But essentially, the whole plot around this episode is that Malcolm was leading this group, which basically was going to be it was almost like a rogue League of Assassins, but now they want to restart the League of Assassins, essentially, but they're called the Thanatos Guild. That's what I was grabbing from this episode. So they're called the Thanatos Guild. Thanatos, I think it's in Greek mythology, essentially means death, I think, or the bringer of death, one of the two. So they were essentially called the Death Guild, if you want to translate it that way. But this group is led by this woman called Athena, who, well, we'll talk about her later because I don't think this could be the last episode we'll see her show up in. Now, they do set up some stuff for next week's episode. They sprinkle it through this week's episode in a couple of different scenes. But the main one was towards the beginning when Diggle talks about being Green Arrow, and Oliver's like, well, it's only us two now, so maybe that's not the best idea, because you don't have new Team Arrow by your side. I think Oliver allowed Diggle to be in Green Arrow earlier on because we had Wild Dog, Dinah Drake, and then also Mr. Terrific there to help him along with his journey, but now it's just Oliver and Diggle, so it's not really the smartest move at this moment to make Diggle the Green Arrow by himself. So it's understandable, and I think it's correct in what Oliver's doing. But as I was saying, that's basically all set up for next week's episode, so we won't really talk about that until we get into our trailer breakdown video later on, whenever it is in your time zone, I guess. But essentially, that Thanatos Guild, as I was saying, is after this map, wherever it's leading to, and essentially, Thea and Roy are actually leaving. They're leaving really early in this episode. I was like, okay, they're off, they're away, we had a goodbye party and stuff, but of course it's interrupted by some of the scouts for this Thanatos Guild, but luckily Nis is there to rescue them. But essentially the rest of this episode revolves around getting that map and figuring out what to do with the map and how to figure out what it's leading to, I guess. Now the first fight for the map I thought was pretty cool. We had that Tigressa, I think her name was. Tigressa I don't think is from the comics. I think Tigressa is Latin or something for tigress. I think. I might be wrong. I think it is actually how you say tigress, Tigressa. Anyway, we see that whole thing, but one of the cool things that we see in this episode mainly, but you did see it a bit in the trailer for this episode, Roy's hat is essentially straight from the New 52. That's the hat that Roy wears in the New 52. It has a raccoon on it. In the comics, it's more of a charcoal color. It was red in this episode, but I think it was red because his suit was black, essentially. But in the comics, his hat is black, and then his suit's red. So they just sort of flip the colors around. But I think it still worked. I really like that hat. I want to buy one. Now, one of my favorite little small parts of this episode was just, connecting back to a scene or a little moment previously in the episode. It was when they first walked in, and I almost said Olicity, but Felicity says, oh, because all the booby traps are there, and she's like, oh, is it Raiders or is it Temple of Doom? Referring to the booby traps from the Indiana Jones movies. And then, towards the end of the fight, Thea goes, I think she said Temple of Doom. I think she said it was Temple of Doom. Anyway, or might have been, it was one of them obviously, but then she ignites or lets off the booby trap. So I thought it was just a cool thing that to defeat those Thanatos Guild members. And yeah. One ongoing part of this episode which I thought was funny, and it's sort of meta because it goes on at conventions and stuff. I know Katrina Law, who plays Nyssa, always refers to Oliver at conventions and stuff as her husband to annoy Olicity fans and Felicity fans. Not in like a spiteful way, just like to joke around, like slightly annoy. And they carried that on into this episode where Nyssa was constantly calling Oliver husband and stuff like that, which I thought was hilarious. Felicity was getting annoyed by it, but Felicity, gave it back as well. So there's some quality banter going on between Nyssa and Felicity in this episode, which I thought was just a nice little moment. Now the sideline story for this episode, like, disconnected from our main story, obviously. It took up maybe like a quarter of the episode, roughly. Maybe you could stretch it to a third, but I'd say a quarter was between Dinah and Curtis investigating the whole corruption going on at the SCPD and its connections to Ricardo Diaz. So, yeah, essentially, that's basically what they were doing, and it also connects to some other stuff, which we'll talk about in a second because it connects to some later stuff. But, yeah, that's essentially their storyline in this episode. They mentioned Renee a couple of times. And I actually thought this was a decent storyline for them for this episode. I think Dinah is on the road to redemption, if you want to call it that, because the past handful of episodes she's been really annoying. Renee's not in the picture, so he can't be annoying. It's almost impossible for him to do it because he's not in the episodes. But yeah, there's some decent building on these characters now, which is good to see. You don't want to have annoying characters in the show. But essentially, to read that Thanatos Guild map, or the map that the Thanatos Guild were after, it needs Thea's blood. It literally needs Thea's blood to let it go, which, Malcolm, bit dark, but yeah, that's how it's going to be read. Now we see that map actually get lit up when, Thea puts blood on it after getting cut and stuff, so the map actually needed blood. Now, Thea defeats Athena, the leader of the Thanatos Guild, and we thought that she was dead, and then they look down and she's gone. So that's the last we see her. So she's coming back, whether it be this season at some point, or later on next season or something. Like, she could be a player next season. I don't think it's going to be the big bad, obviously. I don't think anyone really wants to see the Thanatos Guild as the big bad for next season. But you'd have to guess she would come back at some point. Otherwise, she just would have died at that point. When someone doesn't die, and they get away in a very suspicious way, we should expect them to come back at some point in time. But throughout this episode, we actually do learn that there are actually more Lazarus pits. There was 3. Now, one of them was destroyed by Nyssa. There is 2 more. Now, in the comics, there's much more. There's Lazarus pits everywhere. They set up in the Arrowverse that there's 3. Well, there was 3. One of them's destroyed, so there's 2 more. So people can, still be revived. So that's a bit of a concern for Team Arrow, I guess. Now, next episode, we knew that Curtis would get a new boyfriend, and that gets set up in this episode. It's Anastas. I can't remember his first name. I don't know, Officer Anastas, Police Officer Anastas, whatever you want to call him. That's essentially going to be Curtis's new boyfriend. We know, going into the next episode, that Anastas is not the biggest fan of vigilantes. So that's like a side story for next week's episode. But I guess one of the big reveals, and it sort of spoils an upcoming episode. I think if you've been, staying up to date with some of the Arrow news, you know what's going to be happening. We find out that Diaz is actually pushing Vertigo. That's the drug that's being pushed. Vertigo, throwback to previous season and stuff. It's always good, Count Vertigo, to have Vertigo back. What does Vertigo do? Hallucination Central. And we know in episode 18 that Oliver's going to be seeing things. So I think in episode 18, or I think we should just say we know in episode 18 now that Oliver's going to be suffering from some Vertigo hallucinations, some repercussions from taking it. So look forward to that, some surprise characters coming back. Won't spoil it there. Spoil it now, just in case you don't want to know, but yeah, expect Vertigo to be a pretty big player for at least the next couple of episodes. And then the big part of the episode, which basically, we thought we were getting at the beginning, but it's happening at the end. Farewell, Roy and Thea. It was a really nice moment. We knew it was coming, obviously, but I think it was a nice farewell, very reminiscent of the time that Roy left in Season 3. So I really liked that moment. And I think this episode was a fitting farewell to mainly Thea, but I think Roy as well. But overall, this episode was a really nice one. I really enjoyed this episode. It wasn't the best episode of the season, but I thought the action scenes were really cool. It was a really Thea-centric episode, which I think was the right move to make it a very Thea-centric episode. It was her last episode. She was heading out, so I thought it was a really nice moment, or a nice move to really focus the episode on her. And I'm interested to see where everything goes now, like the maps and like the Thanatos Guild, whether they show up later this season again, or it's left till next season and stuff like that. I'm very interested to see where all of that goes. And yeah, I enjoyed this episode. As I was saying, it wasn't the best, but yeah, a very solid episode. I'm looking forward to the rest of this season and where certain things that of this episode lead, especially the Vertigo stuff with Diaz. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on the video to show your support. Let me know in the comment section down below what was your favorite part of the episode. What did you like? What didn't you like? Just let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.